Excellent. Thank you, George.
Great. So, okay, let me dive in. I don't think I need to, yeah, and I'll start to work through some of this stuff. So this is Document Studio. So, you know, on the, there's just an exe for this in that large, yes, it is unfortunately quite large, 400 megabyte zip you need to download. But if you just basically just unzip that, it is important, if you haven't already done it, you go through the instructions and, you know, put an eval license in place, which you can always review through the help menu and see what the current status of that license is. We can easily get you extensions to that or ongoing dev licenses when the time comes. But for now, that should be sufficient to get you started. And as I said before, this tool is a good way to work with documents, both for classifying and you know, a more, you've already seen, and Ed showed you last time, the ability to just literally kind of through a zip file, actually train a classifier and use it. But obviously sometimes you want to be more interactive, you want to see what's going on, you want to see when there are errors directly. So that's what we can do here, and that's what I'm gonna start with. Again, I'll base this on samples that you do have available to you and are referenced, I think, and you can download so that you can you know, do something similar. Let's get the right ones, which are here. So this is an example where, again, we have, you won't see them here, but we've got a load of samples that are arranged still by folder, but I'll go on to talk about the case where they're not arranged by folder, where you've just literally got a flat set of documents and need to work with. But in the simple case where you have documents that have, you know, a folder structure, as you saw last time in what Ed showed, then you can simply choose the top level folder above, select that, and it will pull in all the appropriate documents that are contained within there. So that's what I'm going to do here, just selecting that top level folder with those subfolders in it. And because they're arranged, I can also, there are a few options here. Normally you'll have everything, you know, each file is a document in itself. There are ways you can deal with, say, a record where you actually want to go through page by page. So you can look at doing this or double-sided. And there are ways that you can rearrange and resplit documents, but we won't go through that today. We're going to assume that each file is a document in its own right. But what I will do is tick this box, which says that those folder names, I want to actually pull in, I want it, because I'm going to train the system using the folder names. I'm going to tick that box, and that's going to mean that it's going to assign the document types for training automatically as I import. So as a result of doing that, what you're seeing here is all of the documents that were contained within those folders, and the type has been entered because of the folder name. So that just, all that is a reflection of the folder that was there, and the status is set to manual, which means that it was done automatically, but it's been told manually what type of document this is. Now, in the simplest case, that may be all I needed to do, right? Because I've sort of, you know, just like working with a zip file, I've trained up a classifier based on this, and I could save that out to a project file, which is a mixture of these things. And I'll just show you. Again, when I save a file in that way, it actually creates two files. One is the project file, which is sort of, you know, this configuration and the files. It also saves the classifier file. So this is what ultimately would get uploaded. This is the learning set that is what is uploaded to the service if you want to deploy this classifier, and that is what can be used. That's the result of the training process. So that's a binary file, but that contains everything it needs to know to run the classifier in production.
This is actually a really important point because Wilson and Sebastian, you're going to have some clients who may want to test and learn with some very sensitive documents that may include patient information or account numbers. And a lot of the teaching can be done on this desktop with this classifier, with Document Studio. And then what's exported to the cloud are the rules that come from the documents, not necessarily the documents themselves.
Exactly, yeah. So you don't ever need to put those, at least, documents to the cloud, obviously in production environment, but even there, we've designed the service in a way that those documents are sent to the service. They're there just as long as they're needed to do the work, and then they disappear again. So there's no, it's designed with the privacy angle very much in mind to give people comfort in that area. One thing though, even in this case where the documents have already been labeled, basically, which obviously they had to be in the appropriate folders, real life is never quite as simple as that. So one of the nice things you can do in this tool is if you go to the top left corner of this grid, you can right click there, and that gives me access to a number of fields which aren't all enabled by default to avoid kind of overloading you. But two useful ones we can look at straight away are the best guess, which is saying regardless of what you told me this was in setting, this is what the classifier thinks it might be. And we can also look at the confidence field, which gives a numeric score for its assessment, how confident the classifier is in its assessment on this, because it's using machine learning and techniques. It is always able to assign not just a yes/no answer to any classification, but a confidence score. And Ed, you may have talked a little bit about this before, but one of the powerful things about our classifier is that those scores, and because I'm sure you're familiar with other, you've used this type of technology and seen it in other products, but one of the real challenges is that you get a score out, but you don't necessarily know how to use that score and what it really means. And you've got some sort of threshold that you have to set to say whether it's confident or not confident. And sometimes choosing that threshold number is a bit of an art, not a science. In other words, it takes quite a lot of, possibly guesswork and then testing and then retesting to find the appropriate level. One of the things the engine does, and the reason it can train quite robustly, is that it sets those levels automatically. And so what you're seeing here is effectively a normalized score. So against its standard threshold, which is set quite conservatively in this tool, it's basically saying anything above 1 is probably fine, and can be treated as confident, and anything below 1 is maybe requires review. Some of these just have a small number of samples, which is probably why this is not quite up to 1, because it takes quite a conservative view in this, and if it hasn't got many samples, it sort of knows that it's not well trained. But the one obviously that stands out here is this one, because firstly, it has very low confidence at 0.5. And secondly, actually, its best guess, even though it's been trained to say this is an appraisal report, it's coming back and saying, I don't believe you. I think it's actually a loan application. So we can look at that. And actually, surprise, surprise, it is a loan application. So this is, showing a couple of things. Firstly, that in the real world, it's very rare that the training data is perfect. And what we're seeing here is when that occurs, it's usually quite possible to find out, and the technology will even alert us in this way to samples that have been mislabeled. But the other thing that it shows is that, again, unlike some other classification engines, it's robust to this mislabeling. It doesn't just blindly believe because we had one sample that had a bad label. It hasn't gone off and learnt that, which then has had a little bit of effect on these, because you see these are less confident than they probably would otherwise be because of this rogue sample. But it's easy for me to see, and this is the power of this tool. It gives me an ability to interactively weed out and find things like this where we've got mislabeled samples in the training data. Yeah. So in this scenario, having been alerted to something like this, which is we're now manually confirming that this is a mislabeled sample. Oh, and by the way, just on that, for customers that want to do classification of documents, it can be this approach can be very powerful in a sort of pre-sales environment. We've wowed quite a few customers where we say, well, look, we can train up the system. Just give us a load of samples. They might say, oh, we're doing this manually today, and we've got great operators, and they're 100% reliable, and we're double keying it, or whatever. And we say, okay, great, give us some samples. But very rarely, even then, are those samples accurate. So the fact that we can very quickly run something like this and then go back to them and say, oh, are you sure that these are all accurate? Because these are the ones that we're getting queried. And then they go away and think about it for a little while and come back. Oh no, actually, it wasn't. Our manual process. Not only is it expensive, it wasn't quite as robust as we thought it was. Who knew? Humans make errors. Right? So just mentioning that it's this ability can really give people quite quickly, customers, a very strong level of confidence that this technology is quite powerful. But even so, having found the error, then obviously what we want to do here is to change and relabel this type, and we can then see what's happened. Well, firstly, this is now fixed. This is confident. You also see that these previous, because it was, with only a relatively small number of other samples, it was pulling down because we were trying to tell it that this was two things. So that rogue sample did have an impact on the confidence in the real applications. But what you're seeing now is that the point here is that when I change this, what you're seeing is this is changing and retraining the classifier in real time, and you get real-time feedback as to what's happened. So the classifier training is extremely fast, almost instant, as you're seeing here. And I can immediately see these type of effects and the effects that I'm having when I correct my samples. Okay, that's great. I fixed the problem. Ultimately, as I said, if we wanted to deploy this classifier, I think you looked last time at using the command line interface. Is that right, Ted? You
very briefly at the end.
Okay, sorry.
I was very fast at that section.
Yeah. Well, obviously, this is one of the other key tools that you can work with. You can interact. So these tools are completely offline. They're not directly working with the cloud service. So they're running a local version of the classification engine at this point. We will be producing versions which in the future that actually directly interact with the service. But if I want to work with with Aluma.io and to bridge the gap, if you like, between the offline tool and the cloud service, then this command line, the aluma.exe, is a great way to do that, and gives me all sorts of options, which again probably Ed briefly showed you last time, to deploy things. All of this can be done through the API itself, the REST API, which we'll talk more about in the final session. But as a convenience and as a way without any coding to access all of those API functions, then you can do it through this tool. So for example, I might say, well, have I got any classifiers already deployed on the service? Yes, I have. I've got one called mortgage because I did one earlier. And if I go just to show you, that's really just showing me exactly what I would see here, right? So this is the classifier in the dashboard, and here it is also from the command line interface. So I might say, well, I want to get rid of that one. So I'll say, okay, that's gone. I go back here. Oops. Not to refresh the page, but okay, it's also gone from the dashboard. So that's me working with the with the service. But if I've created something in this Document Studio tool, I can actually also, I could, there's two options. I could use that CLF file I showed you earlier and use the command line tool, but actually I can also deploy it straight from here. This is my service endpoint. These are my client ID and secret, which again, Ed, you probably touched on last time.
You know, I'm not sure I dwelled enough on that. I think I flashed by it very quickly, and it's an important point.
Yeah, so, you know, in terms of authentication, this is, as with most, you know, cloud APIs, this is how the authentication is done through an ID and secret. Those are most easily created, again, through the dashboard, and I can create a new one at any time. So my account can have multiple ones for different uses, so I can, you know, track things differently. But having once you've got an API client, and again, this is all well documented in the Getting Started guides. If you may already have done, but if not, yeah, you can walk through that. But with these, I can just use this and copy these. So if I was starting from scratch and I didn't already have these remembered, I would just paste them into these fields. That tells the service everything it needs to know, so I can interact with my account, and then I can deploy. That again is doing an upload, and that will now mean that deleted will have now magically reappeared in my account. And here we have a set of oops. Preview pane, yeah, okay. So these weren't included in the training, and these are un-OCR'd documents. So just the raw TIFF files. It is worth pointing out, so when you're using this Document Studio tool, you do need to, the tool itself does not include any OCR function. So it is important that whatever you're importing into here has already been OCR'd, because you don't want to be doing that every time anyway. So that's usually a pre-processing step, if you like. If you don't do that, if you say you've got a PDF that has no, it's just image only, you'll very quickly find out, because it'll immediately mark all the time. For, you know, it does happen, obviously. Oh, I forgot to OCR those. They will immediately be marked as blank in the type. So you just detect if there is no content whatsoever in the document because there's no OCR data, or it could just be a blank document, but it'll just mark everything as blank. So you'll quickly see if you need to do that step.
Sorry, how did you link the command line interface with the web?
Oh, yes. Yeah, so if you haven't done that, so again, you can go through the Getting Started, but there's a, I think it's...
Oh, the login. Okay.
There's a login, yeah. Yeah, so you can, and just so you know, in Windows, I think we may still have an issue that sometimes it's hard to paste in. Sort of, if you just do, you can say, I won't do it here because it'll lose my, you say Aluma login. If you have any issues pasting in here, then you can always use the flags -i and -s to actually put them direct on the command line. But if not, it'll just put those up. So that will just, you know, once you've logged in once, that'll store that data, and then you don't need to worry about it after that.
Okay.
Unless, of course, you want to change the client ID or the account you're using. But, you know, again, now that I have that classifier deployed in the cloud service, if I wanted to I can always forget exactly what the yeah, so say Aluma classify using mortgage one first of all. Or I can do it on all things. And this is you again now uploading those documents into the cloud and running the classifier that I created over here in Document Studio and giving back results. And it's giving, you know, this is just showing me in a text form, but I can also, if I wanted more detail, I could get JSON files out of these, which would give more detailed confidence information out of the documents.
In a way, it's doing the same thing as what you showed on the Document Studio as well, right? It's setting, it's taking a batch of documents and has the ability to classify them and give you some confidence or not, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. It's just now doing it through the cloud service by using this CLI. The real power of this tool, though, comes where you don't have pre-labeled data, or you want to do more of a sort of discovery process. So for that, I could use these documents for that and just not pull in these types, but because it will show it more clearly. I'm going to start from scratch and pull in a brand new set of similar documents, but a larger set of deed-based documents, if I can find them. Okay, here. So although these are TIFF files, there are text files alongside here, which is what it'll use. So again, these haven't directly got OCR content, but there are text files which have that. So again, let me maybe get rid of these for now. I can remove those fields that I'm not interested in. This is how it would normally look. So this was just a folder full of 324 documents. And we've now got a bigger challenge, because you can see these are unordered and unlabeled. So I've got to start from scratch on these in terms of, I don't know what's here, I don't know what they're called, you know, and so on. So this is a fairly common scenario that you're starting without any knowledge of what's required. The first thing I can do here is because these are essentially in a random order at the moment, they're just as they came off the scanner or whatever, I can use the classification menu and ask the system to cluster the documents. And what this is going to do is it's going to pull all those documents into similar groups. So you see that the order has changed. The IDs are no longer in numerical order. And I've got this new column called cluster, which just has labels of A and so on. And if I go down, we can see it's labeled B and C and D. And the clusters will tend to get smaller and smaller because it puts the biggest ones first, until eventually you get down to these don't have a cluster because they're just on their own. It hasn't been able to join them with any other documents. But the power of this is I can have now a fairly strong expectation that whatever is in cluster A, they're probably quite similar, or they will be quite similar, because that's why it's put them together. So it really makes the process of reviewing these documents much, much faster, because if I look at a few of them, you'll see here, these are all indeed the same type of document. So I can look at a set, and here I'm just multi-selecting that, and I can say, okay, these are all a deed of trust.
Oh.
So I'm going to go through a process here of manually labeling them, but you'll see it's not actually a very difficult process, because the tool makes it quite easy to do. So I'm also not going to bother to look at every single A at this point and check, although I might do, because I don't really need to, because it doesn't need this many samples to learn what a deed of trust is. So I might just say, well, I'll look at the first 10 or whatever it is, and that's enough, right, for now at least. Now we're going to have a look at cluster B and see what we've got there. And well, okay, this is a different cluster. No, well, these aren't the same, but actually it's a different form of the same document. So it's different enough for it to put it in a separate group. But actually, as far as I'm concerned, and as far as the, this requirement is, sorry, I can call it the same thing, and so on. So now I may go and look at cluster C, and now we see this is definitely a completely different document type. So now I might say, okay, I'm going to call that, maybe I don't care about the fact it says survivorship. I just, as far as I'm concerned, these are all called warranty deeds. So I'm going to label it. Now, what's happened now, because I've given it more than one document type, it's trained the classifier immediately, and it's come back, these documents that I haven't even looked at yet, it is already confident enough, which in fact means the confidence is above 1, to suggest what this is. So where previously we just had training data, so everything was labeled as a manual, in this case, we've now got a mixture. We've got these ones which are, it's going to show me what I told it was. But these other ones are basically the classifier telling me what it thinks this document must be based on what I've just trained it on. And again, we can look at the confidence in that, and you see that it's already fairly confident on some of these types, and they are indeed, all deeds of trust. And the power of this now is I don't need to go through every single one of these. I mean, I could go and I can just hit enter on them and confirm that some of these are indeed what it's telling me to improve the training. And ultimately, I might want to go through all of these and actually confirm as many as possible, because that will only improve the learning. But in a simple case, I don't need to bother to do that. I can just look at whatever I want to look at. Maybe carry on down, look at some of these other clusters. You see that even though this is another variant of a deed of trust, which I could just, and the more I confirm, the more confident it will become. But at some point I can just say, well, it already knows what these are, so I don't need to bother to tell it any more information. I can just focus on the ones you see here, clearly highlighted ones that it really doesn't know anything about yet, because it's got very low confidence in this document, for example. And that's because it's a completely different type, which I hadn't trained it on yet. So I might select a few of those and call that a modification. And again, you can see it getting more confident now, even with just a very few samples in that type too. So I'm showing quite a lot here, so I'll pause there to make sure you're sort of getting the idea of what you're seeing here. This really interactive training of the classification engine with, real-time, both the ability to cluster documents, to group them, and real-time feedback about how well the system has learnt the document types. Does that make sense?
Yes. So the intelligence is in this tool, this part, because the classification is in my PC. So
it's running a local copy here of
of
the engine. And I mean, it's worth knowing that as well. Although we focus on a cloud service, if you come across requirements where, for whatever reason, a cloud service is not the right job, then we can make this technology available at anything.
Perfect.
From a .NET DLL, which is ultimately what's being used here behind the scenes, through to a local copy of our cloud service. So the advantage of the cloud service is that it has high scalability, super fast response when, but that can all be, if the client demands it and the case is big enough, that whole service can be deployed on in someone's own data center or someone's own servers.
Oh, perfect. This expand the possibility of the solution. Just maybe in Argentina, I don't know if Colombia have the same issue, but we have the banks here, the biggest customers are bank here. Because of local laws, maybe not all the documents can go out of the country, no matter if it's physical or digital. So this expand the possibilities to use this solution here in Argentina to more customers. It's
yes.
very nice to
no,
have
exactly. And we can have, I mean, so, you know, I think there are many benefits for everyone ultimately of using the cloud where as much as possible.
Of course.
And that might be that the first step is to say, well, okay, it can be in the cloud, but it has to be in Argentina, in which case we can discuss with you what it would take to get that, which is fine. That's definitely an option. Or it can be, as I said, anything down to, no, it has to be in this data center on these machines, can't leave the building, you know, or whatever. And again, that's fine too. So yeah, there's a whole breadth of possibilities about how this is.
Perfect. To have a just in case option. Of course, my first option is going to be always cloud first, yes, and push cloud. But at the end, if something will happen, we have the possibility to do another thing. So it's
precisely
nice.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you for the acceleration.
So again, I won't go too much more on this. I think you get the idea. Some other things though you can do is, you know, again, because you can sort by field. So at some point you might say, well, I've had enough labeling going through these. I'm going to sort of look at the ones that it's sort of least confident about, and find things that are, you know, again, this, as I said, this can be used, and this is even a tool that you can give to the end user or the customer, the people who understand the document. The beauty of this is pretty much anyone with a small amount of training can become someone who does machine learning and trains a classifier. They don't need to be a data scientist. They don't need to understand about thresholds. They don't need to understand about, you know, they just go through some fairly simple procedures to provide the information about the documents. Again, focus on the low priority ones, build a classifier, and you can go. The other thing you can do here is, you know, again, I don't even need to save the project. If I just keep the project open, but I remove all these documents and then pull in a brand new set of unseen documents, I can immediately get a feel for how well trained the system is. You're seeing here, you know, not very well, because I've not done an awful lot, but you know, this is already showing that a good proportion of a completely unseen set, it's going to classify with some confidence. So you can iterate. You can, you know, pull in a few hundred, train it up, then pull in a few hundred more documents, and very quickly build quite, you know, powerful documents. The other thing you can do, and again, in the interest of time, because I know we're already halfway through, and we definitely want to get into the extraction side of things. But just so you know, there are also tools which allow you to create detailed results in the form of CSV files, and you can import those results. We provide a spreadsheet which is on that download, which allows you to look on a set of documents. This is actually the original set we worked with, again, that including that mislabeled one, and gives real detailed results about, you know, what it should have been, what it thought it was, and ultimately can give you accuracy data. This is the mislabeled sample, and this kind of thing. So again, I won't go into this in detail today, but it ultimately, what it enables you to give a customer or is something like this, which is a graph. It's not a very interesting one in this case because the set is so small, but it's a graph of the two things that a customer ultimately cares about when it comes to document classification. Classification rate, which is what percentage of documents or what proportion of documents, as I've got shown here, are going to be confident. So you'd love that to be 100%, which means full automation. But then of those ones that are confident, what percentage of documents are going to be accurate, which obviously you would love to be 100. So the idea is always to be in the top right-hand corner, but in reality, there's going to be some sort of curve on this, but it allows you with one simple test to give people information about the level of automation they can expect, and also the trade-off between that and the level of accuracy they can expect. So again, probably a more detailed subject you want to go, but I at least wanted to make you available that this kind of level of analysis exists and is certainly appropriate if you get into larger projects which involve a lot of document classification.